Hi, I'm Jeff Mandell, co-chair of Stafford Rosenbaum's Appellate Practice Group. This is the first of 4 videos about oral argument this week in the U.S. Supreme Court in the case of Murr v. Wisconsin. Murr v. Wisconsin is a takings case about when private property owners are entitled to compensation from the government based on government regulation of how they use their land. It's an important and exciting case that's getting a lot of attention this term. It's also the only case this term from the state of Wisconsin. Finally, Stafford Rosenbaum filed a brief in this case on behalf of several municipal groups, and so we've been following this case for a long time and have a particular interest. Now that oral argument is over, we're going to do this series of short videos that briefly tell you what the case is about. That's this video. What facts and what issues and legal questions are presented by the case. That's the next video. What arguments each of the parties made in this case. That's the third video. And then what happened at oral argument and what we see coming next. That'll be the final video. This case involves 2 riverside lots along the St. Croix River in northwest Wisconsin. The Murrs, who are the parties here, are the children of the people who initially bought those lots. Their parents bought those lots in the early 1960s. First they bought one and built a small riverside cabin, and they transferred ownership of that property to their family business. A couple of years later, they bought the lot next door, which is adjacent, and they never developed that lot. In the 1990s, the parents gave the lots, both of them, to their children, and for the first time the lots came under common ownership. That's important because during the decades that the parents owned the property, the federal government, the state government, and the county government all adopted laws to protect the natural scenic beauty of the St. Croix River. Under those laws, each of the 2 lots on its own was too small to be developed and built upon. The zoning regulations, however, had an exception called a grandfather clause. If you were grandfathered in, that is, if you owned the lot before the regulation took effect, you could still develop it. There's also in that county ordinance, however, an exception to the exception. This is a common feature of land use law around the country, and it's called a merger provision. It says if you have 2 lots that are adjacent to one another and neither one is big enough to develop and they're under common ownership, then they merge into one property. So that's what happened here. When the parents transferred the 2 lots, each of which was too small to be developed on its own, to the children, and the lots came under common ownership, they merged into one property. When the Murrs then asked the county for permission to sell the undeveloped lot so that they could use the proceeds to renovate the cabin, the county told them that they couldn't do that, or they could sell it, but when they did, it couldn't be developed. Ultimately, the Murrs filed a lawsuit alleging that the county law meant that their property had been taken from them without compensation and that that was unconstitutional. That lawsuit is the one that has now reached the U.S. Supreme Court. And in the next video, we'll talk some about the governing law leading up to this case.